So the preamble, this is going over if you were to have labor on any given RFQ, any labor quotes, unless it is a budgetary estimate, any labor quote has to have a quote tool accompanied with the quote. It'll get uploaded into a separate folder that I'll go over later because, again, with the way upper management wants some things to be proprietary to certain groups, we'll put this in a different folder that those who have a need to know will be able to get into and look at. But there has to be a quote tool. This that you're seeing is called the quote tool. Some original NPG sales reps will call a site survey a quote tool. And the reason for that is the actual quote tool, the tool we use to come up with the numbers for our quote. As you'll see when we change these, it gives us hours and dollar amounts. There used to be a tab on here that included the site survey. At the time, even though it was an Excel spreadsheet, it was a very good site survey that was all inclusive of what we needed to know to be able to build a quote. But the quote tool is not only for apps engineers, it is also for our technicians. So if we don't give a quote tool, if we don't upload a quote tool to NetSuite for our technicians to look at, or at least the service managers to look at, they don't know how many hours we quoted or proposed to be able to get the job done. Separately, in a different recording, I'll go over where we're getting, how we know what hours to use. It's a different tool that I've emailed you guys. But once you know what you need to choose and where you need to choose it, you'll select your person here, and it gives the amount of hours. For all intents and purposes, service doesn't care what the revenue is. I mean, obviously, we need to get it right. And their guys are getting paid from it. Their commissions getting paid from it. So we need to get it right. But what they're really looking at, the schedulers and the service managers, is did the proposal person, I'll call this all proposal engineers, did we get it correct so that they can actually get the job done in that allotted amount of time? If we didn't, I get a phone call and go in and find out, was there something about this that we're unaware of, that we didn't know? Did we just make an error? What's the problem here? So I get those phone calls. Really, I only get maybe 5 a whole year. We have a pretty good system and knowledge base of people on our team that if one of us doesn't know the answer, someone else on the team will. So we try to go internal to our team first to get answers before we go bother another group. But ultimately, as I'm going through this quote tool, when there are questions, this is where Brad Randazzo and Andrew Bernal would be able to assist. And these are the things that I've asked them. They already do assist us on, but I've asked them in the call yesterday, if you were on it, to be even more available to picking up the phone. That way, my engineering team can continue to quote and get things done instead of assisting you guys. So I'd be your first call. And if I'm unavailable, if it's and you might want to write this part down, if it's a battery install or any kind of like conduit running or movement or spill tray installation, anything that is not charger or UPS, Brad Randazzo will give you a quick answer. His answer will not include travel time. That's important to know. His answer will include, it's going to take us 5 hours to do this. It's going to take 2 men, or whatever it is that he's talking about. So just have the understanding, once we get to the part of the quote tool where we talk about travel, is when Brad or Andrew help on giving labor, they're telling you specifically, if I'm already standing there, it's going to take me X amount of hours to get done. So they will be able to assist. Andrew, use him for any charger installations or modifications of the charger in any way, shape, or form. Same thing for UPS. And if you're familiar, a rectifier or an inverter, same deal. But any of those components, I'll call them smart components, not just passive components. Those two will be ones. I should know the answer, but there are things I don't know the answer to either, and none of us on our team would. So we call the professionals in those areas, which would be Brad or Andrew. So if you can't get a hold of me, call one of those two, depending on what your specific scenario is. And you guys are going to have, I was hoping not, but again, I went through the 90 that we have in the RFQ last night, and I think all but one had labor associated with it. So we're going to have to learn the labor portion of this. I will do the best I can to put the least difficult ones on until you guys tell me if one or two of you say, hey, this is too easy, give me something hard, then we can ramp it up a little bit for you. But we'll go as easy as we can on it. So let's say the one we did for Thomas a while ago, that was a battery instead of a breaker. They want us to go install a battery. So there's a chart that I'll go over in a few minutes, but let's say it was a HX batteries and this was blank. I've already messed with this. I've already messed with this formula. I manually typed in there, so you can see that there's a difference. If you're familiar enough, you can just copy and paste over your formula and you fixed everything. But if not, then use a different column. So you can free type in a lot of these blanks. Some of them you can't, but I've allowed access to be able to make quick modifications on the fly when we need to. The reason for that, let's say Brad, we got help from Brad. He says it's one man, one day. Regardless, really, if it says HX battery or SBS battery, it doesn't matter. If he says one man, one day, as long as that matches right here and it's the correct technician, then you're okay with pricing. Correct technician. If we're doing any UPS work, we'll use a UPS technician to do that. If we're doing any testing work, we'll use a testing technician to do that. Any kind of battery installation, or we call an assist or a helper. Sometimes a UPS person needs a helper. That helper comes from the industrial group, not the testing group, but the industrial group. So you may be using a UPS guy, and I'll go over those examples later when the helper. So as long as you have the one right here, then you're good. And you can manually change. I can say, hey, we need him for 2 days and only 8-hour days. So I've stepped on my formula bottom. So when you're coming in, I'm going to undo those two things. You're coming in, you're installing the sheet that I'll go over later with you to know your number, to say that you now know this is the one man, one day job. Z0 is zone 0. So for mobilization, we have zone 0, which is no mobilization. We have zone 1 and we have zone 2. I can provide those zone maps to you. I should have done that yesterday, but I can provide those to you. So the first assumption of this is that it's a zone 2. It's a zone 2, so there is no additional mobilization needed. So for offshore, that's just something you just know because the customer pays our helicopter ride to get out there. And when we say out there, well, oh, sorry about that. Yeah, and again, my internet connection here from the storm went down, so I'm having a hotspot. So yeah, sorry for the last few minutes of that. So starting back, not sure where 2 minutes ago was, but I'll start back. Let's assume that we know we've looked at the other sheet that I have not yet gone over in this video, that I will go over in a later video. You know from the sheet that this is a one man, one day job. So I go down to I5, I meaning industrial, the industrial crew, a level 5 person. The Z0 means zone 0. So Z0 is zone 0. We have three zones, 0, 1, and 2. And those are based on Brian Dardar and some other guys previous to him have come up with zoning maps for each sector, for each hub that we have, that we quote from in terms of labor. And that map is kind of an amoeba shape, and I'll send those to you guys. It's an amoeba shape of a map, but it tells you where our zones end and begin for other ones. So for offshore, everything's always a zone 0 because the customer pays our helicopter ride to get out to the platform. And we go from within an hour or two's drive from our Mandeville office that we quote from. So zone 0 for anything offshore. Let's say that it's not offshore and we're having to drive more than 2 hours to get somewhere. According to that map, you would pick a mobilization of zone 1 or 2, depending on what the map tells you. And let's say you pick zone 2, it knows it's one man. It's 2 days because it's zone 2. It's going to take us 8 hours to get there and 8 hours to get back. So that's 2 total days. So when you start looking at what it's doing down here and calculating for you, there's one man, so it's adding 16 hours total worth of travel. It takes me 8 hours to get there and 8 to get back. If it were zone 1, it's taking me 4 hours to get there and 4 to get back. So that's 1 full day of one man that is copied from up here. So it gives me 8 hours of travel time. So on site means we're already there doing our work. We're giving ourselves 12 hours. This is auto-populated. So 12 hours totals up over here, depending on how many different jobs that you're doing at that specific site that day or week. It adds your on-site. If this were 2 men, I'm going to manually change this. It's going to step on my formula, but if it's 2 men, it's going to add your hours, but not your certification report. So it's 20 total hours of work with 2 extra hours built in for the report writing that we have to do. So that's why it doesn't go to 24 instead of, or this is why it goes to 22 instead of 24. Our travel time remained, actually our travel time doubled because when I change this, it changes the formula here to 2 men instead of 1. So it gives me the travel time of 16 hours. Total hours that we're charging the customer is 38. So again, part of my previous conversation is this portion of it is a part of what the service manager and the scheduler look at to make sure that we have enough time to get there and get back. We have enough time on site to get the job done. That's why it's important that this quote tool gets uploaded when we do have labor that we're quoting, because if one of you goes to a different company or isn't here, is out sick or whatever, and we need to have an answer of what happened, what went wrong, or what went right, I need to be able to go find the quote tool, and I can't find it if it's on your hard drive. So you upload everything that we do onto the quote record in NetSuite. So to talk about the hours, we have always quoted, and this is outside of now our East team, but we have always quoted a day rate. If something takes us 1 hour or 2 hours, as NPG at least, we always quoted a day rate. The decision was made to continue doing that by our now Exponential Power, with the exception of data center and telecom. We're told by Brian to quote whatever hours that Harley, if you don't know Harley's one of the technicians for the East team, for the Atlanta team that came over with QSS. He and Gary, his last name slips me right now, but he and Gary are the 2 subject matter experts in how long it takes to do anything that's data center or telecom. That will be outside of Brad Randazzo's realm. He doesn't have the experience in those 2 areas. There's a lot of different things that's not worth going over in this particular video, but there are a lot of different scenarios that you have to account for labor-wise when you're doing a telecom. Even with the same DC system install, there's a lot of nuances that are required that are different for those two type customers. Day rate being 8 hours, we have built in 2 hours for zone 0. We have built in 2 hours for things such as, let's say it takes us 30 minutes to get there and 30 minutes to get back. There's 1 hour we charge for. And then also there's always a getting on site time, for lack of a better term to use. You can't just pull up to the front door and walk in and start working, obviously. Most places are going to have a gate up front, a guard shack, or whatever you want to call it. By the time you get checked in, you get the right person to come escort you back to where you're going, you're at least burning an hour. So we're building those 2 hours in, for one, because it's the customer's fault, not ours, that we're having to sit there for 2 hours waiting on them to get us back there. And then for 2, we still need the 8 hours to get done whatever it is that we're doing. So we build in those 2 hours. So a day rate is really 8 hours with 2 hours cushion for things that are outside of our control that because of the customer we're having to do. Certified installation report, if you're not familiar with it, at the end of anything a technician does, there's a report that's written about it. It's concreted into or memorialized into what we call service reports, SRs, some people call it, but it's our reports that our technicians write. They write them while on site. They'll go out to their trucks. Some of our trucks have a little office space in it with air conditioners, so they sit in there and they type up the report of what they did. And so the decision was made by service. We need 2 hours on average for that, so we charge those 2 hours. That's an explanation of why what those are. And I explained that so that to tell you that you have the liberty to change that if you need to. If there's a reason why we don't need to do the installation report for whatever reason, take the 2 hours out. You don't have to ask any questions, take them out. If for some reason we're going to go do just one thing, we don't need a full 10 hours, and we don't need a full 10 hours, we still have to charge an 8-hour day because it's a day rate. We're losing that technician for a full day, basically. He can't go do anything else. So we still charge the 8 hours to do that. So you do have liberties to change it. Again, I'm stepping on formulas. So I think you guys I'm sure you guys are savvy enough to know how to bring that back across. But you will have the ability to change those things. That's why I left them there for you to change. So to move along before we do Q&A, these are what we call adders. We just always call them an adder. We're adding a spill, we're replacing a rack, we're replacing spill. When I come here and select a certain job, it's assuming the bare minimums are required for that job. Something that would not be a bare minimum is it's outside of a zone 0, so we have an option there. Something else that is not a bare minimum is we're replacing the rack. If we're changing a C&D battery, we're going back with an Intersys or an STT battery, whatever the case is. If we need a different rack, we have to replace the rack. You check the box. It adds another 4.5 hours times 2 men, because it's going to take them, I guess on average, these numbers, all these hours will come up by service, not APPS engineering. So my assumption is on average, it takes them 4.5 hours to change out a rack. I can't tell you if that's true or not, but that's the number we're given, so we go with it. Same thing for a spill. If we're changing out the spill containment, if we're replacing the rack, the spill containment kind of is a free thing to change. I wouldn't add an extra thing in. You have the liberty to do that or not. It's not going to take them 9 hours to change out a rack and a spill containment. But those are there as options in case we're not replacing the rack. We still have to get the rack out of the way, obviously, to change the spill containment. So I would never check both of them. We're going to overcharge the customer for one, and we're going to push ourselves out of competition for the winning bid. But those are two separate things that you can do. If you want to add a spill containment, to me, it should still say 4.5 hours because you still have to remove the rack. However, the number we're given for the quote tool is 3 hours. So that's why you have those options there, is if a typical 10-hour day won't get the job done, then you have the extra hours. And I have a chat. Let me see what that says. Yep. Go ahead, Thomas. So, and I assume you guys can still hear me. I know everyone's on mute, so I'm just talking away here. So, any questions on that part of it? I'll continue through, then we'll do kind of a Q&A at the end. But this is going to be the same, this top portion, really the whole thing across all three of these different types of technicians that we quote with. So when you learn one, you've basically learned them all. So I'll continue to go through the industrial crew here. If we come to a point where we need to add these in, I'll help you guys individually to do this, but I'll go over them really quickly. If we're having to fly somewhere, you guys obviously know at this point we have Dry Creek, but when we didn't have Dry Creek and we were going to California to do work, we were having to fly there. DOT will not let our guys drive more than 12 hours. So instead of driving 12 hours and sleeping in the truck at a truck stop overnight, we fly our guys there and we ship the equipment we need. If we were doing that, if we're going to New York, per se, right now, we would still fly someone there. There would be airfare. Any number you type in here, it's going to put a GM on it before it adds to the total down here. So be careful that GM is somewhere around 30%, I think, GM on it. So be careful not to overestimate here too much. But I really don't want anyone to go through and say, let me go to Google and find out how much airfare is. You guys have flown in airplanes, you know, roughly $400, $450 will get you anywhere in the country and back. So anywhere within the US on a Southwest flight, which is what they're going to be forced to use, whatever the cheapest airfare is, I'm going to say $400 is close enough to get one person. So you'd have to multiply that by however many people. And if you look down here, the airfare was bumped up to $615 by whatever the GM was that's hidden in all these different cells. That's why there's airfare there. Same thing for tolls. If there's a toll bridge they have that they have to cross. I've never done laundry in my life. It's there, I guess, in case people need to wash their clothes, but I don't ever charge for that. Parking, at least in New Orleans, it's usually $60 for 3 days worth of parking there. If I fly somewhere and come back, you know, so I would put $60 in there. And again, it also gets rounded up or GM'd or gross margined, if that's a term, up to $92. If you select mobilization up here, it will add in the nights, however many nights it said. So that's an automatic addition here, and it multiplies it by the number of men. So even if it was one night with 2 men, it would count 2 nights. So the day rate that we charge the customer is $140, and that's for M&E, meals and entertainment. So M&E and their hotel stay, their lodging. I think if you're in the government, you know, M&E is what they use anyway. Meals and entertainment, room and board, they call it here. That's all automatically there. When you get down to the very bottom of this is the quote labor revenue, not profit, but revenue. So anything that you've added or changed up here, excuse me, gets reflected in this number. You have the addition, even though this is below it, it's added up here in mileage charge. Our standard mileage charge, and this is because of maintenance of our fleet, so oil changes and things, our standard charge is a round trip 200 miles, even if it's a zone 0 for one trip. So that's going to automatically pop up no matter what. If I were to change this mobilization to something different, you'll notice that, well, it doesn't do it here because I stepped on the formula, I guess. If I were to change this mobilization, it changes the mileage. So instead of 200, and I stepped on the formula somewhere, it looks like I maybe saved that to 200 at some point. So if it were a zone 1, in that blank up there that I put, it would have moved it to 400 miles. Zone 2 is 300 miles one way and back. And you can see the reflection there. I call this zone 1 and this zone 2. So I stepped on that formula. I think the one I probably gave you guys, I stepped on it. So be careful with that. That's what this is, one trip. If this were multiple trips, this assumes we're going out there on a Monday and not coming back till Wednesday. But if there are multiple trips and you know that from the RFQ as you're proposing this, if they tell you in the RFQ, hey, we got to go out on Monday to set the charger up, and then we have to go back out on Wednesday to check the charger, and then on Friday to take it down, well, that's 3 separate trips. So you would have to manually type in 3 there because it's not going to know that you need that. So that's why I've left this open for allowing you guys to be able to do it. And I think you're probably starting to see the complexity of why we can kind of keep this quote tool on lockdown. If people started using this willy-nilly to come up with things, you could really, jack things up. I think it's a PR word to use there. You really jack things up with our pricing and either not charge enough or put us out of contention for a competition. So it's very important to understand the workings of the quote tool, which is why I'm going into the detail I'm going into, so that when you do make changes, you know that there are ramifications of it. And if you don't remember this stuff, at least you know, I might need to ask someone on the AE team, what have I changed if I do this? So this obviously grew to a larger number because we're just playing with the quote tool. For the one for Thomas, if it were his quote and it were a simple installation, we would have only been at the $1,200 or $1,400, whatever it was that it ended up being for us. And again, because I stepped on some formulas, this is not correct. The tabs for testing will be the same. You have different levels of text to choose from. And I have the different document I emailed you guys about that we'll do that in a separate recording to know how to select which one of these to use. This one, you don't have to go because it gives a good enough description. Anything that's under 700 amp hours and 120 volts or less, we can do one test per day at 10 hours. You can play with these and look at these descriptions. The test one's a pretty good one, pretty easy to not have to go look at your sheet. You can do 2 tests per day, but we bump it up to 16-hour day. So it's still one person, still one guy, still one day. It's just a longer day. So you can see the difference in how it adds these numbers as it goes down. And you get to the end of this, you still have mobilization. You don't have racks that you add or spill containments that you add. If you're familiar with NERC reports, you put the number of reports, which is the number of battery strings. So a NERC report is something that's a requirement of some of our customers. They have to comply with NERC, which is a certain standard of testing that we have to comply to, and it takes longer for us to do it, and the report is longer for us to do. So if I have, this is per string, so let's say I have just one string, I'm doing one NERC report, it adds another 2 hours in that blank. If there were 2 strings, parallel strings, still one system, but 2 strings, then I'm going to have to do 2 reports. Actually, that may be incorrect. It's per system. So I don't think the parallel, I think it's still going to be one NERC. I can confirm that if we come across one, now that I'm thinking about it. Let's say we're doing 2 different strings, 2 different DC systems, 2 NERC reports. So there'll be a total of 4 hours that it adds to. And just like the other tabs, they're all adding up right here. So you're seeing, you can, in your mind, verify, does this make sense to me or does it not? And know whether to ask questions or not. Airfare, same. All these things are the same. UPS, same deal. You have different UPS technicians, different levels to choose from. Same thing, you have mobilization. You do have NERC reports on those as well. It'll add up the hours, the amount of time it's supposed to take if you were to fly someone there. You have a blank here I didn't go over a while ago, a blank for shipment of tools, whatever it is that you need to add in there. Shipment of tools, $300, I'll ship anything there and back, I would think. So you don't go sit there and fill out, try to go to Google and find out how much it costs to ship something. $300 to get anything there and back. If you have multiple things you need to ship, you can add them across here, even if you're not using the tab, the columns up here. If I added another 300 beside it because there's something different there, it'll add that 460. It'll still add to the revenue at the bottom, and it'll be captured for the CSC person to see that, yes, we thought about it, and yes, we have charged for it. Because they'll ask, hey, we also have to ship. I don't see that in your quote anywhere. So that's reasons for having those extra blanks there. And the only other thing, we went over the equipment tab already. The only other thing with these is you'll notice on here we have service department discount or premium, as well as sales department discount or premium. Some sales reps, very few, will say, you know what, I can make $3,500 off this. Our company only want to charge $31.12, but I know I can give it to them for $3,500 because I don't want to embarrass myself on recording. I'm just going to calculate that. $31.12 minus $3,500. That's an extra $388 I need to add. So I'm adding. So I just type in 388. Gets me to $3,500. So I've given a sales premium of 388 because they think they can pass this off at 3,500. Their advantage is they get more pocket money that the company doesn't mind them having because we only require this. They can sell it for that. Let's say it's the opposite. We don't need that, and they say it's got to be under 3,000. I don't care if it's $299.99. You say minus 113, and it gets you down to a discount, say sales discount. Just so you know, that comes directly from their commission, not from the company. The company's still going to make that. Well, I guess they're not going to make it 312 because they don't do it, but the payment gets paid back from commission to the company to be able to get what they need out of this job. So that's the reason for a sales discount or premium. If there is a case where we need to take a big discount I'll go over it later in more detail, but Brian has agreed to splitting certain things with sales if it's labor. So if the labor ends up being 3,500 and they need 5,000, there are certain cases where service will eat 250 of it and sales the other 250. So they'll split the difference there. And again, for a technician, that affects their take-home pay if they have a premium or discount. So there is a ramification for doing those. So if you're asked to do that in RFQ and I don't catch it, just get with me and I'll go over what we need to do there. The last thing I'm going to go over with this particular recording is just what the summary page is, what it details, what it tells you. Bottom line, this 9100, if you're building a quote tool, has to match what goes in NetSuite. If there's 9100 here and 9,000 in NetSuite, the CSC person is going to stop and they're going to come to the proposal person and say, your quote tool doesn't match your quote. Which one's right, which one's wrong. And we'll have to correct whichever one and upload it to NetSuite to make sure we fix it. So it's another check and balance to make sure we have the right thing. And just so you're aware, it says gross margin. I can't change this tab. I don't have the password for it. Neither does anyone in this company anymore. But it should say gross profit, because that's not the margin, that's the profit. So our gross profit of this is $3,650. The total cost of our sales is $5,450. You take the addition of those two numbers, presumably you'll reach the 9,100. But that's what this is. It's just a summary of what's there, but it also gives you the gross margin percentage, which is 40.1% on this. The importance of that, and this is where there will be a stark difference in the different units. Test, you guys are used to making a lot of margin. Stationary is not. They have a large revenue, but the margin is different. So a 40% margin is actually really, really high for stationary. I would expect there to be somewhere between 20 and 30% margin on any given job for a stationary quote. It just depends on what exactly it is we're doing. But the point of this is it's a quick check to make sure that you didn't accidentally put 0% margin on something and you meant to put 50% margin, whatever the case. It's just that it's a smell test, so to speak, of what you're doing, and it gives the CSC person the exact same check and balance. Did Jamie put in the right number here and the wrong number here? He made an error somewhere. So it's another check and balance for our company, for a CSC person, another set of eyes to look at it and make sure we got that right. So I will, Bill, if you want to end that recording here before we go into Q&A, up to you.